Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGplayer affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's commander is Maelstrom Wanderer. It's a 7/5 elemental that costs 5 blue, red, green. It says creatures you control have haste, and it has Cascade, Cascade. So when you cast this spell, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast this spell without paying its mana cost, put the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order, then do it again. So most of the time when you cast this, you're basically getting 2 random spells from your library for free. Now I say most of the time because with this deck tech, we're going to take it in a different direction than we've ever taken a deck. What if we could guarantee that we hit the exact same 2 spells every single time? Well, the way that Cascade works can be very difficult to do, or it can be extremely easy. The tough way might be to include all high converted mana cost spells in the deck except for the 2 that you want to cast every time. So every spell in your deck except for 2 of them are going to cost 8 or more. It's probably going to be pretty hard to do what you want to do, so let's not go with that. So let's take this with the easy route. Cascade only hits non-land cards. So the easy solution is to just have lands except for those 2 spells in your deck. Yes, that means that we're going to be running 97 lands. Is it kind of crazy? Most definitely. Can it work? Absolutely. The average commander deck has around 36 or so lands. This deck is going to be running nearly 3 times as much at 97. Now the lands that we pick and choose obviously have to be the right ones to actually make this work. So let's talk about our strategy. We're going to get lands out and get to 8 mana as quickly as possible. Now since we're running 97 lands and 2 of our combo pieces, we're not going to have any ramp spells. So we need some of our lands to actually act as ramp pieces for us. We can't just sit around and durdle for 8 turns and not do anything and expect to win. So having some lands that can tap for more than 1 will be huge. With an ideal hand, we can cast our commander by turn 4 just from our lands. And how we win with this deck is very simple. We just have to cast our commander and then we cascade to combo off. I don't want to spoil the actual combo just yet, so let's get to that later. Now for my deck techs, I typically go through the lands in a separate section and it's after all the other cards. But because this deck has 97 lands, it's impossible for me to do that. So the lands for this episode are actually going to be in the tactics. Go figure, it's a unique deck tech for a very unique deck. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start things off with tech number 1, New Horizons. First up, we're running Mirrored Landscape and Blighted Woodland. I mentioned earlier that we want lands that actually ramp us, and these are 2 great examples. We don't have any ramp spells in this deck, so these are going to have to do. Mirrored Landscape comes into play tapped, and it can tap for a colorless. By paying 2 and tapping and sacrificing it, we search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, and then we put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle our library. So this one land can get us 2 basics of the same type into play tapped. This is a pretty early way for us to ramp that can help us cast our commander quicker. And although Blighted Woodland is slightly slower, it's still effective in the stack. It can tap for a color, so we can pay 3 and a green and tap and sacrifice it to get 2 basic lands into play tapped. So this is slightly slower, but it does come into play untapped and it can get us any 2 basics. But we've got some other ways to ramp outside of lands getting other lands. So let's move on to tactic number 2, 2 for 1. First up, there's Safari's Isle, which is an old land, but a very unique one. It has facing, so this faces in or out before you untap during each of your untapped steps. While it's faced out, it's treated as though it doesn't exist. It does initially come into play tapped, and it taps for blue-blue. So this land can't tap for mana right away, and you don't always have access to it because it has phasing. But it is a land that taps for 2 mana on its own. You will have to be careful with when you play this to make sure that it lines up with when you can cast your commander. You really don't want this land phased out when you actually need it. And then there's Castle Garenbrig, which comes into play tapped unless you control a forest. You can tap it for green, but the important part is its activated ability. By paying 2 green and tapping it, you add 6 green, and you can spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. So essentially this is netting you 1 mana on top of what it would normally produce. If you just add that 2 green to your mana pool instead and tap this for a green, it's going to get you 5 mana. But instead, by using its activated ability, you get 6, so 1 more. And that casting restriction doesn't matter because Maelstrom Wanderer is obviously a creature. But outside of these 2, there are plenty of other lands that can produce more than 1 mana in different ways. Let's go over one of those ways now in tactic number 3, Storage Unit. First up, we've got Mage Ring Network, which can tap for a color, so we can pay 1 and tap it to put a storage counter on Mage Ring Network. By tapping it, we take off any number of storage counters from Mage Ring Network, and then we can add colors for each storage counter and move this way. So once we get 2 storage counters on this, we essentially get more mana than just tapping it. Fungal Reaches is very similar, but slightly different. It also can tap for a colorless, so we can pay 1 and tap it to get a storage counter on it. But then it has pay 1, remove X storage counters from Fungal Reaches, add X mana and any combination of red and or green to your mana pool. So to actually remove those storage counters, we actually have to pay for it. And that means that this needs 3 storage counters on it for it to be effective in the stack. Next up, we've got part of a cycle of lands with Hollow Trees, Dwarven Hold, and Sand Silos. They do the exact same thing but a different colors, so I'm just going to read Hollow Trees. Hollow Trees enters battlefield tapped, and you may choose not to untap Hollow Trees during your untapped step. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Hollow Trees is tapped, put a storage counter on it. And then you can tap it to remove any number of storage counters from Hollow Trees, and then add green for each storage counter and move this way. Basically, the longer that you have this in play and tap, the more storage counters that you can use for mana. Because we only care about casting our commander once with this stack, we don't really care that it's going to lose all of its storage counters. So we're also going to be running another part of a cycle with Rushwood Grove, Mercadian Bazaar, and Saprazan Cove. And again, because they all do the exact same thing, I'm going to take you through Rushwood Grove. It comes into play tapped, and you can tap it to put a storage counter on it. Then you can tap it to remove any number of storage counters from it and add green for each storage counter and move this way. Again, all these storage lands work in a pretty similar way. They might be one-shot effects at giving us a lot of mana, but with this deck, that's what we need. So let's go over some lands that help in a different way in tactic number 4, deplete and delete. For this tactic, we've got another part of a cycle with Hickory Woodlot, Sandstone Needle, and Saprazan Scary. I'm just going to read Hickory Woodlot to illustrate all 3. It comes into play tapped with 2 depletion counters on it. And by tapping and removing a depletion counter from it, we add green-green. If there are no depletion counters on Hickory Woodlot, you sacrifice it. So essentially, each of these lands come into play tapped but can give us 2 mana twice. So they can actually help us if we happen to need to use mana for something else, like a Mirrored Landscape or a Blighted Woodland. Just make sure that that second time that you use it is for your commander. But now let's go over some lands that we can use and then get rid of when we need to. It's time for us to go on to tactic number 5, here and gone. And again, we've got another part of a cycle with Havenwood Battleground, Dwarven Ruins, and Sylvanite Temple. Let's just take a quick look at Havenwood Battleground to see how these work. Havenwood Battleground comes into play tapped, and it can tap for a green. By tapping and sacrificing Havenwood Battleground, we add green-green. So essentially these are one-shot depletion lands, but you can use them for mana without having to sacrifice them. But there's a similar land to these that is even better. So let's go over that one now and some others in tactic number 6, colorless is more. And that first lane that we're going to talk about is the golden pig of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the golden pig for this deck is Crystal Vein. Crystal Vein is a very simple land. It says tap, add colors to your mana pool, or tap and sacrifice it to add colors to your mana pool. The reason that this land is so good and above our other lands in this deck is because it comes into play untapped. Again, we don't care that this has to be sacrificed to get that mana, it's going to be worth it to cast our commander. This land is one of the few ways that we can actually cast our commander on turn 4 with the right hand. Giving us 2 mana from 1 land right away is a fantastic effect for this deck. And that's what makes it the Golden Pig. Some other lands that can give us 2 mana are Temple of the False God and Untadaki the Cloudkeeper. Temple of the False God has tap, add colors, activates this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. So we don't have to sacrifice this one, but we actually need 5 lands to get this to tap. And then Untadaki comes into play tapped, but we can tap it and pay 2 life to add colors, we can only spend this mana to cast legendary spells. Again, that restriction obviously doesn't matter because our commander is legendary. Again, the more lands can give us more than 1 mana, the better. But it's also a good idea to have some lands that give us any kind of mana. So now let's move on to tactic number 7, any way you want it. First up, there's Command Tower, which can tap to add 1 mana of any of our colors. Unclaimed Territory does the exact same thing if we're casting our commander. Then Exotic Orchard can usually give us any of the colors that we need because it can tap to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Next up, we've got some one-shot effects with Tendo Icebridge, Aether Hub, and Crumbling Vestige. Tendo Icebridge comes into play with a charge counter on it, and we can tap it for a colorless, or we can tap and remove that charge counter from it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Aether Hub does essentially the exact same thing, but it uses energy instead of a charge counter. And then Crumbling Vestige does come into play tapped, and it can only tap for a colorless, but when it comes into play, we add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Again, we really don't care that these are one-shot effects, we just have to cast our commander once. We also have some lands that can help us out in different ways. So let's go over those now in tactic number 8, stay back. First up, there's Mystifying Maze, which can tap for a color, so we can pay 4 and tap and exile target attacking creature an opponent controls. At the beginning of the next end step, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So essentially, sometimes if we don't get the right lands, our deck might go a little bit slower. Having some lands that can protect us in the meantime can be huge. So we're also running Colony Garden, which comes into play tapped, and when it comes into play, we create a 0/1 green plant creature token. Then Carekeep can also make 0/1s by paying 1 in a red and tapping it. Next up, there's Treetop Village, which comes into play tapped, can tap for a green, and we can pay 1 in a green to turn into a 3/3. Then we've got Raging Ravine, Lumbering Falls, and Wandering Fumarole. Each of these come into play tapped and can tap for 1 of 2 colors, and they can turn into a creature as well. Again, it's not an ideal scenario, but sometimes we need to protect ourselves with our lands. And although we've covered a ton of lands, we're not quite done just yet. So let's go over our final lands in tactic number 9, the basics. To round out this deck, we're going to be running 63 more lands. 21 of those will be a forest, 21 will be an island, and 21 will be a mountain. And now that we've gone through all 97 of our lands, what's next? So let's find out in tactic number 10, Cascade away. So after we get to 8 mana and cast our commander, what happens next? Again, because we have 97 lands, we're guaranteed to cascade into 2 cards. And those cards are Mana Severance and Jace Wielder of Mysteries. Mana Severance is a sorcery that costs 1 and a blue, and it says search your library for any number of land cards and exile them, then shuffle your library. And then Jace Wielder of Mysteries is a 4 loyalty planeswalker that costs 1 blue, blue, blue. It says if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. And then its +1 is target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard, draw a card. So essentially we cascade in both of these, casting them, and we win. With Mana Severance, we take out every single land in our library, leaving us with nothing. And then we +1 Jace to draw a card, and instead of losing the game, we win. Yes, this is very much a glass cannon deck, and things can go wrong. Your commander or one of your combo pieces can get countered, and then you're in trouble. Or you may even just draw into one of your combo pieces and have to cast it separately. So it's a very fun and unique deck that goes about things in a completely different way. There aren't too many commanders that can pull off what this is trying to do. Just casting your commander and winning on the spot is pretty unheard of. And for this combo specifically, I want to mention that I am not a judge, but I am 99.99999% sure that this works. When you cascade, you are exiling cards from your library and then casting the spell. You are going to cast Mana Severance while those lands are exiled, but those exiled lands get put onto the bottom of your library in a random order before Mana Severance resolves. I believe that's how it works, but if I'm wrong, I do apologize, and there are alternative combos that you can use instead. Speaking of which, let's go through those alternatives, and again, these are not cards that are currently in the deck, but there are ones that you could switch in for those 2 combo pieces. The first combo replaces Jace with Laboratory Maniac. It has that same clause that if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. But this one doesn't actually draw you a card, so you actually have to wait a turn to win, so it's a bit more risky. You can also win through combat with one of the many Kiki Jiki combos. Kiki Jiki has haste and tap, create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That token gains haste, sacrifice it, then gain the next end step. So with this, you can make infinite hasty tokens with something like Pestermite. Because when Pestermite enters the battlefield, you can tap or untap target permanent. So you use Kiki Jiki to make a copy of Pestermite, that copy comes in, it untaps Kiki Jiki, and so on and so forth. Kiki Jiki also works with Deceiver Exarch, which is pretty much the exact same thing. Or you could use Zell's Conscripts, which gains control and untaps target permanent until end of turn. Or Breaching Hippocamp, which when it enters the battlefield, you untap another target creature you control. Or Corridor Monitor, which untaps target artifact or creature you control. Or there's Bounding Crassus, which when it comes into play, you can tap or untap target creature. Or even Hyrex Tower Scout, which when it comes into play, you can untap target creature. And of course, there's Great Oak Guardian, which when it comes into play, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn, untap them. Now, outside of these Kiki Jiki combos, I'm sure that there are plenty of other 2-card combos that you can use. The reason that I chose Mana Severance and Jace, though, is it's probably the most reliable in my opinion. But feel free to pick whatever 2-card combo you want. Just make sure that you keep it at 2 cards and not any more. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Maelstrom Wanderer EDH rec deck will set you back $343.49. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.91. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are about to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's add in Undiscovered Paradise by taking out a forest. Next up, let's add in Rainbow Veil by taking out a forest. And then let's add in Springjack Pasture by taking out an island. Next up, let's add in Ancient Ziggurat by taking out an island. And then let's add in Terrain Generator by taking out a mountain. Finally, let's add in Ash Barrens by taking out a mountain. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the commander in general. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.